60,000 miles a year, enter about 60 events. For some, they're victorious, but for many, they bring the car home in pieces. To be a good sprint car driver takes courage and concentration. But to work on these sprint cars takes tenacity and perseverance. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Bowman, and the man you're about to meet truly represents the character of a world of outlaw sprint car racer. Some of the greatest sprint car drivers to ever strap on a helmet. Guys like Steve Kinzer, Jan Opperman, Sammy Swindell, Doug Wolfgang, and Brad Doty all have one thing in common, and that is Kenny Woodruff, the crew chief for Bobby Davis Jr. and the subject of this week's Hidden Heroes.
Hidden Heroes is brought to you by Fram Oil and Air Filters, Bendix Brakes, and Autolite Spark Plugs and Wiring Cable, which are all quality products of Allied Signal.
The man is a sprint car racing legend, bigger than life, but not by much. He's like a giant playing with his toys when he dips his huge, raw-boned hands delicately into an engine. Hands that can assemble an engine like a Swiss watch. He's been helping men win races ever since that first World of Outlaw event back in March of '78 in Mesquite, Texas at a bull ring known as Devil's Bowl Speedway. A race Jimmy Boyd won in a machine prepared by Kenny Woodruff.
I think that that was a deal where we just come back for that show. And I think I slept in the truck. Those things were hard back then, tough.
Sprint car racing has always been tough, always been hard. A game where even the toughest and the hardest are challenged to survive. In its earliest days, AAA and then USAC sanctioned most of the major sprint events that gave the sport what credibility it had. But sprint car people by nature and sentiment have always been frontiersmen, living the old Western cliche about the fastest gun in the West, traveling from town to town, challenging the local heroes, the fastest gun. The sprint car people were and are by nature the outlaws of motorsports. When Ted Johnson, an open cockpit racer in the 40s, decided to begin a sprint car circuit, somehow the name World of Outlaws fit and stuck, to the amazement of just about everyone, including Kenny Woodruff.
I figured it was probably like most other associations that it'd phase itself out in a couple of years, but it's come a long ways, and it gets better every year.
But as the circuit grew over the years, this huge pioneer didn't. The times got tougher, and some deals didn't work. And 4 years ago, he reached what he figured was the end.
I guess halfway through the season, I quit. I went, sold what I had and returned what I'd borrowed, and went home and forgot about it. That's probably as down as I've ever been in sprint car racing.
But good stories have better endings, or at least take better turns. And Kenny Woodruff's no exception. But even that took its own sweet time. In 1986, a New Mexico car dealer named Casey Luna decided to go World of Outlaw sprint car racing and wanted to hire the best crew chief in the business. He figures he got him.
Kenny is the kind of guy that is going to make things work. When everything else fails, Kenny's going to be around and is going to make things work.
All else did fail, and Casey Luna was right. Kenny Woodruff did make it work.
I'm running for lieutenant governor, and that means that I've gone into a...
Once upon a time, and not so very long ago, Casey Luna, sprint car owner, ran for lieutenant governor of the state of New Mexico.
Well, it's kind of like my racing program. I says, we didn't win. I says, well, we scared the hell out of them.
Enter Mrs. Casey Luna, Beverly, as much a partner in racing as in life.
When he was running for lieutenant governor, he missed a lot of races. He couldn't come. He couldn't come to the races. And much to his surprise, I think, all of a sudden he found me going to the races. I think it proved to him how much I love racing because I left him and went to the races.
When Casey and Beverly got into sprint car racing, everyone else was running Chevrolet engines. The Lunas went with Ford. To this day, the only Ford in a field of Chevys.
The Ford car right now is a serious threat, well, let's say to the Chevrolet powered cars. They're running in the top 3 to 4 constantly, winning their share. And like we was in Pennsylvania, they won 3 in a row, and the Chevrolet seemed to be struggling on the stop and go tracks where it took a lot of torque. And they've definitely got that thing. It's a serious threat.
The Ford is an awful strong motor, and like I said, you know, when the other teams start looking at it and start wondering whether it's legal, illegal, or what, then you know you're doing right.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I think that's the whole thing. That's the beautiful part about the world of Outlaws. It's probably the most competitive circuit there is, and when you do something a little different, now you got people watching you.
People watched and laughed. Drivers signed up one day and left the next. The Luna machine was jinxed. The Ford just wouldn't work. Even after they hired Kenny Woodruff to mastermind the machine, the disappointment continued.
They call it the penalty box. We kept blowing motors, and the drivers would quit, and we'd hire another one, and everybody just called it the penalty box. If they didn't have a ride, they could get a ride in that one.
Well, I don't know. I read one time where, you know, it was a very demeaning program. They used to call it the penalty box, I think I read one time, because several drivers would get in and then get right out. Well, I think those drivers that got out wish they were back in today. I really, really feel that.
In 1988, the Lunas hired Bobby Davis Jr. as their driver, one of the dozens who had worked with Kenny Woodruff over the years. They had finished high in the point standings in 1984 and 85 before splitting up. The 25-year-old was excited about the prospects of reuniting with Kenny.
I was getting to go back racing with Kenny Woodruff, you know, and he takes care of a car better than anybody, so I felt like that was going to help me out in the long run, and the Ford motor was exciting to me because it was different.
And so the partnership was formed, and no longer would the sleek number 10 be known as the penalty box. But on one rain-soaked night in Memphis, it would feel like one. The 50th stop on the 1988 World of Outlaws Tour. From Tampa, Florida, to Fargo, North Dakota, to Fremont, California, to Syracuse, New York, they take their dirt track show. Kenny Woodruff and the Casey Luna team make them all, traveling close to 60,000 miles a year. That's twice around the world. There's always a sense of lingering drama to any World of Outlaws weekend. The money is big. The point standings are important. It's a televised event, and it's in Bobby Davis Jr.'s hometown. Kenny Woodruff hardly notices. His eyes are only for the blue number 10 that Bobby Davis Jr. is qualifying. As he slowly, silently watches by himself, the Lunas stand atop their truck, partners in a slow revolving ritual, immersed in their hobby.
Well, I love it. If I had my choice, I'd be on the road with them all the time, but we do have a business to run, and we have to go home. Casey literally has to tell me, Beverly, it's time, you know, we got to go home, because I said I'd be out all the time. I love it. I really do. I hate to miss a race.
It's such a marked contrast. The Lunas, all razor-cut and perfect, their jewelry sparkling in the Tennessee night. And down below, the quiet crew chief, whose only fashion statement is a change of flowered caps from one night to the next. You'd look at this huge, silent man and come to one of two immediate conclusions: that he's either very simple or a very complex individual. Very few will ever know for sure.
He is a very unique individual, and you have to, I guess I've been fortunate being around people all my life that very quickly I was able to understand Kenny, his way of doing things and his quietness and his aloofness, maybe sometimes it seems, to a lot of things that you might be saying, but he's listening to everything you're saying.
Casey Luna, he's a good car owner. You know right up front where he stands, so you just do whatever you need to do to get it so he's happy. As long as he's happy, I'm happy.
But on this first of a two-night stand in Memphis, neither is happy. The car isn't pulling enough RPMs.
Like we could put a bag in that thing, but there ain't no way we're going to know until we do it.
And a fierce late summer rainstorm would give them more than enough time to do just that. The races were canceled. The track was a quagmire. And as number 10 was getting nature's wash job, Woodruff, the Lunas, and Bobby Davis Jr. could only wait for a dawning of another day. Unlike the other teams who will have to prepare their cars for the Saturday event in a motel parking lot or at the track's infield, the Lunas have a home away from home in Memphis. Bobby's father, a former driver himself, has an electrical shop not far away. There, in its shadow, the work on number 10 is renewed. On this circuit, Bobby Jr. is one of the few drivers who is just as happy under the hood as behind the wheel. Together, he and Woodruff search for the problems.
Bobby's one of the few guys that could probably take care of that thing and run it himself if he had to. There's not too many of them guys out there. And I kind of like it because it shows me he's interested enough to help on it or do whatever he wants to do on it.
Kenny's taught me a heck of a lot. For one thing, he taught me how to take care of a race car. He taught me all the easy ways.
Don't mistake this for a best buddy relationship. It's doubtful too many folks get real close to Kenny Woodruff.
But most time we're together where we're either working on the race car or at the racetrack, and he's just trying to make that car finish every lap, and he's trying for us to win all the races. It's pretty business.
We're friends in a respect that when you're with somebody 12 hours a day or 18 hours a day, 9 months out of the year, you're still friends, but it's still a business deal. Like, he's got his motorhome, he goes his way and I go my way, and if we meet in the parking lot, fine, but if we don't, that's fine too, you know?
Hard as that may sound, there's a soft side to Kenny Woodruff. Ask his wife Annie, who travels with him now.
When the first time he met me, he asked me if I like racing. I said, yeah. He said, oh boy, that's good. He said, why? Because my first wife never liked it. That's what I like to do, and I said, it's fine with me. Follow all the way.
Well, I didn't know them when they weren't on the road together, and I can't imagine Kenny without her. They're constantly, you know, together. She's always busy. She'll wash the truck or the trailer, or she helps keep that floor clean. And Kenny's a spotless guy anyway. He wants everything done just so, and she helps him do that.
Everybody know me. All the guys, the drivers, they know Annie. Especially when I'm bringing some burritos. They're always asking, you bring me any burritos, Annie? So not today. But they know me.
And daughter Tammy is there sometimes too, watching over her father, almost as much as a boyfriend who drives on the circuit. There, she doesn't have to worry about her father so much.
I worry about him a lot on the road when he's by himself, when my mother and I are not with him. And he's like a machine. He only gets like 3 hours sleep, and then he can drive 12 hours, 15 hours to get to the next place where he's got to be. A lot of people know him as a mean guy. You know, they think that he's just a mean guy, but during when we're traveling alone in the truck, I mean, he's the greatest man there is.
The World of Outlaw show draws an excited crowd to Memphis Motorsports Park, and they get their money's worth. Qualifications, heat races, a 6-lap Fram Dash, the B main, and the A main. More than a night's work for Kenny Woodruff and his driver Bobby Davis Jr. Only 25 years old, he's already one of the top drivers on the circuit, behind veterans like Steve Kinzer and Sammy Swindell.
He's smooth, you know. He knows what he's doing out there. I don't worry about him. He knows what he's doing on the racetrack.
That doesn't mean Kenny Woodruff is easy on his young driver. The others have noticed.
He's kind of tough on drivers every now and then, but he gets results.
I look at it this way. It's their job. They get paid to do it. I get paid to do what I do. And if you don't do your job, it's time to change the situation.
There's no threat of that now. The big man's thoughts are only on getting the car ready for the main event. Davis has qualified 4th and finished 2nd in his heat race. He had started on the outside row in the Fram Dash for cash, but lost to Sammy Swindell. Now it was time for the main event, in which Davis would start on the front row. While Davis took a breath to handle the media and Woodruff put the finishing touches on number 10, Beverly Luna was working the side door to the trailer, selling T-shirts and caps to the fans. But come race time, she and her husband are back on top, beginning their dance one last time. Kenny Woodruff lights up, alone by the fence, totally absorbed in the race. Flag is lifted, number 10 begins to sputter. Its fuel just fumes. Davis coddles the car into the infield as another yellow, and then a red flag is waved, so the rest of the field can fuel up. And then confusion reigned. A race official tells Davis he must go to the back of the pack when the race resumes, because he pitted before the yellow flag.
We ain't gonna do that, Bobby. No way. Tell me that. Okay, what happened to our car? What happened to our car? Is it missing? We ran out of fuel.
As Casey Luna rages, Kenny Woodruff remains placid. But if humans could smolder, he'd be a mountain of fire.
He ran out of fuel. The reason all these other guys are in here is because they were running out of fuel.
In the end, Bobby Davis went to the back of the pack while the angry crowd booed. And then proceeded to make one of the hardest charges of the night, passing cars as though they were standing by watching, moving up quickly in the standings. Something had to give, and it did. It would be at the end of the Memphis weekend for Bobby Davis Jr. and his number 10, a mangled piece of equipment now. As so often is the case in racing now, only the cars were hurt seriously. But the crowd stood by silently, anxiously, as the drivers climbed out of the wreckage. They'll rebuild quickly, one of the things that Kenny Woodruff does best. And he and Bobby will move on to Albuquerque for the next show. The number 10 right side up and rolling again. It's a way of life, what Kenny Woodruff does best. Part of being the master of the Outlaws. Is this pioneer wealthy after all these years?
As far as money goes, no, but I feel like I'm rich. But I feel good about myself.
Traveling the World of Outlaws circuit has its peaks and its valleys. But with the love of his wife, the support of his friends and his family, Kenny Woodruff will remain the master of his profession. Even though he's a man of few words,